Hey there, Sterile Processing Universe. It's Hank Balch. Thank you for joining us for this Now You Know series. We're going to be talking about big data with Kyle Louie from Aesculap. He is the strategic sales executive for that team. And Kyle, welcome to the show here.
Hey, Hank, thanks so much for having me, man. It's been an honor to be here.
So what does a strategic sales executive do in this space?
Aside from sounding like a lot more important than it actually is, and being impossible to fit on one line on a business card, strategic sales executives on Aesculap's strategic sales team, go figure, are responsible for the sale and support of our intelligent sterile processing solutions. So talking about things like automated inventory management, strategic growth planning for absorbing abnormal OR growth volume, from a quality assessment perspective. We do quite a bit with deploying machine learning in a smart, impactful way in the perioperative space.
So I know we're going to be talking about big data, obviously, in this series, but I don't want to make any assumptions out there with what folks think about when they hear that term. So let's just kind of start at the ground level. What is big data, and what kinds of big data are we talking about in the perioperative and the sterile processing space?
Yeah, totally. It's a good starter question. So we've all heard these terms, right? You've got you have big data in tech, right? You have big tech. You have fintech, lots of financial management, financial technology, and you hear med surge. You never hear med tech, right? So when I got into this business a couple of years ago, prior to that I was a product rep for Aesculap. So I was selling instruments and containers, being local support from education perspective. And I just noticed almost across the board at most hospitals in, my dark little corner of the Pacific Northwest up here, almost every hospital was operating almost in like a technological dark age, man. Like the reliance on pen and paper was just huge. So I think when we say big tech in healthcare or big data in healthcare, we're really not talking about the same scale as we would in, a lot of the other Fortune 500 industries. I think we're, in a kind of just coming out of the Bronze Age, to be honest, when it comes to technology in healthcare, especially sterile processing.
Yeah, I was really curious to know before we got on camera here. I was talking about for about 10 years, I've been kind of telling folks we're in the age of sterile processing. Finally, folks are starting to wake up that, hey, we exist and we actually impact the bottom line to the facility. And obviously we have impacts on quality, but you're right. The data piece and just what data is out there and what can we do with the data is really on fire across that continuum of surgical services. So, obviously, there's been tremendous financial impacts coming out of the pandemic and all the other impacts around regulations and stuff that hospital systems were already dealing with. So talk to me a little bit about how this big data conversation, the information and the tools can actually impact the bottom line in our operating rooms today.
Maybe let me jump up on a tiny soapbox in order to kind of frame this question.
Go ahead.
Historically in the United States, right, healthcare has always been a for-profit business, but unlike almost every other Fortune 500 across any other industry, it's government subsidized, right? So I like when I was like trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life and decided I wasn't going to be a doctor and it was, time to leverage my skill set and be a device rep, right? Icarus and the sun falling too far, something like that. I'd always heard it was a good choice for a career sales rep because healthcare is recession proof, right? Because of that government subsidy. But the pandemic has, just destroyed years worth of elective cases, and especially with things like, Obama's 30-day readmit policy, the CARES Act, coming out of the pandemic, the ability for hospitals to operate the way we've always done it because of that safety net of being government subsidized, recession proof, right? It's not the case anymore, right? So looking at operating a profitable business versus operating a business is something that I think is a very new concept to a lot of healthcare leaders.
So even though folks are starting to wake up to the reality that data is there and that they need to be doing something with it, they have to do something with it to keep afloat and to continue growing at the pace that some of the surgical volume is requiring. There's still issues around perception versus reality when it comes to the data that you're using to make decisions. So can you kind of speak to what that challenge is and the impact again that it has just on the practical outworking of what we're doing with the data in healthcare?
Totally. I think a good example of that would be like tracking system data, right? Let's just say from a case scheduling perspective, the software is telling me that I have 5 major basics on the shelf. Therefore, I can schedule 5 of these cases back to back without having, the need for a turnover because I got 5 of them sitting there. Well, actually, that data is wrong. We had 5 of them when I, spun my tracking system up back in 1997. But we haven't touched that data since. And, now we only have 4 of those because one's constantly out for repair. And, we've seen this, one of those 5 items constantly being requested on preference cards because they're pulling 1 or 2 items out of it. That doctor just got to have that instrument, right? So this is where I think we start running into pretty significant day-to-day operational challenges using inaccurate or poor data to make, even the most granular day-to-day, tactical decisions. Push that out into the stratosphere, looking big picture, talking, to your point about accelerated growth and, kind of catching up to that baseline where we used to be pre-pandemic. It's just so difficult for hospitals, I think, to achieve that level of growth without really understanding where they're currently at from a reprocessing capability. So shooting in the hip in the dark with your eyes closed is never a good idea, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Your analogy or your example about the tray was in there in 1997, but it hasn't existed probably in 10 years, but you never know it, or that you never knew it, but it's a data point, right? So, that's such a great example of, hey, I am dealing with data. The problem is it's not the right data or the data is not complete. And of course, we're going to have a lot of time to talk about the impact of dirty data in this series. But I'm going to wrap it up here for this first episode. We're going to come back in episode 2 and talk about the largest gaps of business intelligence in the sterile processing space, how that impacts the OR. And we'll talk about one of my favorite topics, tribal knowledge in our healthcare facilities and the impact that has on data. But I want to thank everyone for tuning in for this first episode of Now You Know About Big Data here with Kyle Louie. And I want to encourage you, like we do all the time here at Beyond Clean, keep fighting dirty.